So starting off, I have the Lord of the Rings trilogy. These are the theatrical cuts, not the extended editions. Hot take, but I actually prefer the theatrical versions over the extended editions. Oh my god, blasphemy. So yeah, as great as the extended editions are, I do prefer the tighter pacing of the theatrical cuts. I do love the extended editions. I'll maybe rewatch those like once every like 5 or 6 years or so, but theatrical versions are like kind of my go-to if I'm ever going to rewatch the trilogy. Then I have Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2 is definitely one of the best theatrical experiences I ever had in theaters. Dune Part 1, I wasn't like super hot on it the first time I watched it, but then like the more I've rewatched Dune Part 1, it's like just grown on me a lot. But yeah, I do think Dune Part 2 is the better of the two, but I think they're both amazing, and I kind of just view it as one amazing movie all put together. And so then next I have the Criterion version for Mulholland Drive. Definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. The first time I watched this movie, I did not understand it whatsoever, but I just absolutely love sort of like the surreal atmosphere that this movie had. It does kind of like remind me a lot of like Hitchcock movies, except with like David Lynch's weird surreal spin on it. And it's kind of hard to talk about what's so amazing about this movie without spoiling it, and I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, I will just say one of the best surreal movies ever made. I don't really hear this movie get enough credit for how funny it is. It's like, I actually think it's like a hilarious movie, but it's also just like an amazing thriller first and foremost. And it even does have a little bit of horror to it. And then next up, I have a movie that is very much one of the major influences for Mulholland Drive. That is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. This is definitely my favorite Hitchcock movie. It definitely kind of has like all of the suspense and tension and thrills that you get in pretty much all the other classic Hitchcock movies, but this is definitely Hitchcock at his most surreal, in my opinion. And it also, I think, is a prime example of a movie that fits that saying where every shot looks like a painting. Like, this movie is one of the most gorgeous movies ever made. And then the next one is definitely kind of a controversial movie to purchase. It's Rosemary's Baby. And the reason why it's kind of controversial is because Roman Polanski, the guy who directed it, suffice it to say, he's a monster. Like, he's a terrible human being, to put it lightly. But I don't know. I'm kind of more of a separate the art from the artist person. And, you know, there's so many different people who work on a movie. Just because one person who worked on the crew, well, I mean, the director, the most important person, but still, one person who worked on the crew is a terrible person and got royalty checks from it. I still think it's such a great movie, and I don't know. Like, I definitely think it's one of the best horror movies of all time. One of the best depictions of gaslighting that I've ever seen in a movie. It also has some pretty interesting social commentary regarding like abortion and bodily autonomy. You know, the movie came out in like 1966, so it was pretty ahead of its time in that area. And it also does have a depiction of like satanic cults and like stuff like that, which I don't know why, but that topic always fascinates me when it's portrayed in movies. Speaking of satanic cults, Eyes Wide Shut is another movie that kind of depicts that in a way that I find really intriguing and interesting. This is probably my favorite Kubrick movie. I wouldn't say it's his best movie. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this movie to everyone, but I definitely think it is my favorite movie of his, even with its flaws, because like there's certain scenes in this movie that are so good that it kind of just elevates the entire movie for me. And then I also have The Shining, another great Kubrick movie. I definitely think it's probably the best haunted house movie that I've ever seen. I mean, it's a hotel, not a house, but you get what I'm saying. And then the other Kubrick movie that I own is 2001: A Space Odyssey in 4K. This is probably Kubrick's magnum opus. Like, it's probably not my favorite Kubrick movie, although it is up there. But I do think this movie is like peak Stanley Kubrick. Like, this is him at the top of his game. I mean, everyone knows how legendary it is. I definitely think it lives up to its reputation. And then this is the latest addition to my Blu-ray collection, just came in the other day. It's Challengers. My favorite aspect of this movie is definitely the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross musical score. I talked about that in another video already, but yeah, I just absolutely love the vibes and aesthetic and aura of this movie. And then I also have The Social Network, which you probably can't really see from this cover, but yeah, The Social Network. I also already did a video about this movie, but I think it's just a perfect movie. Everything about the writing, the directing, the music, the acting, it all came together perfectly. And then the next one is Hereditary, which I do think this is probably one of the best A24 horror movies. I will admit that I did kind of get on board like a hype train when I first saw this movie. Like, I was like super into it, and I kind of impulsively bought the Blu-ray. So I don't know if it really holds up for me as much as it did at the time. I still think it is a great movie. And then we have another movie that I kind of bought impulsively, which is Black Swan. I don't really know how much this movie would still hold up for me now, but I don't know. There was a time where I watched this movie and I was just like super into it, and I impulsively bought the Blu-ray right afterwards. Okay, and then next up I have the Indiana Jones trilogy. I absolutely love all three of these movies. I know a lot of people don't like Temple of Doom, and I get why, because like, yeah, there's a lot of very legitimate criticisms of that movie, but I don't know. I still love Temple of Doom. I think it's a really enjoyable movie to watch. It's one of the most unhinged blockbusters ever made. It's almost like a borderline horror movie at times, but it's also like just an amazing action movie. Yeah, I absolutely love all three of these Indiana Jones movies. And then obviously we have the original Star Wars trilogy. Empire Strikes Back is definitely my favorite of the three, but I do like all three of them. I mean, yeah, Return of the Jedi is definitely the weak link of the three, but I still think it's a really fun movie. And I do think it kind of sticks to landing at the end of the day because like it has some great scenes with Luke and the Emperor and all that. And then I also have Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, movies where I just absolutely love the atmosphere and aesthetics. I love the cyberpunk setting. These movies are not perfect in my opinion, and I can see why a lot of people find them boring, but I just get so entranced with the atmosphere in these movies that I love them. I definitely think I probably prefer the original Blade Runner just a tad bit more, only because of the Vangelis score, which I love, and also like the Tears and Rain scene I think is one of the best scenes ever. But there are aspects of 2049 that I do prefer over the original. I do think 2049 actually does have like a slightly better story. The original Blade Runner just has something special about it that puts it a little bit over 2049, but that's not to knock 2049 because I think these are both amazing movies. And then I have The Matrix, which I think is one of the best action movies ever. Also just a great sci-fi concept. I think the first half of the movie is pretty much perfect. It sets up this mystery, and not only does it deliver on the mystery, it actually exceeds your expectations. Like the first time you watch this movie and you don't know what it's about, you just like, the opening thing is like, what is the Matrix? Like, and then you kind of just follow Neo go down the rabbit hole and you find out what the Matrix is. And it's just kind of crazy. It's mind-blowing. And then I have Pulp Fiction and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, two Tarantino movies. I think Pulp Fiction is Tarantino's best movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think it has issues. I wouldn't say it's like Tarantino's best movie, but I love the setting. I love like that 1960s vibe. I love the soundtrack. And I also think this movie is absolutely hilarious. I think these are two Tarantino's funniest movies, and that's probably why I bought both of these. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is one that I kind of bought impulsively. And then I have The Big Lebowski, which is, in my opinion, one of the funniest movies of all time. It's extremely well written. It's my favorite Coen Brothers movie for sure. I mean, it's a very silly movie. It's a really dumb movie, but I don't know. It just cracks me up so much that, of course, I love it. And then I have There Will Be Blood, which I do think is a masterpiece. I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I actually think that my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie is Boogie Nights, with There Will Be Blood kind of being like a close second. And then I also have the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy with Caesar. I love these movies. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is definitely my favorite of the three. I don't think the other two are nearly as good as Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but like as a whole, the trilogy is still great just because of how awesome of a character Caesar is. And yeah, I have a huge soft spot for these movies. I don't know why, but I love the concept of just like apes like rising up and creating like this like civilization. I don't know. This is super interesting to me. I also love the original 1968 Planet of the Apes, and I was going to buy that on Blu-ray, but I couldn't find it for a reasonable price, so I guess I just have to settle for the Caesar trilogy for now. But yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Planet of the Apes. I love these movies. All four John Wick movies. I actually got John Wick 2 as a gift, and then so once I had that, I just had to complete the whole series. Yeah, they're just super entertaining. I think like in terms of just like pure like gun fu action movies, I think John Wick is about as good as it gets. Oh yeah, and I also love that Rina Sawayama is in John Wick 4. I'm a pretty big fan of her music. Okay, and then I have The Wolf of Wall Street, which I got this one as a gift, and I'm really glad I got it as a gift because this movie is extremely funny and extremely entertaining. I've watched this movie a number of times. It never really gets old. Like even though the movie is 3 hours long, it feels like 90 minutes. Like it just absolutely goes by so fast. Then I have Inception. I have no idea when I acquired this movie. I've had it forever. My favorite Christopher Nolan is probably The Prestige, and I don't have that on Blu-ray, but Inception is great too. I love this movie. It's definitely like probably top 3 Christopher Nolan for me. And then I also have The Dark Knight, which is in my opinion probably the best superhero movie ever. I think it's also one of Christopher Nolan's best movies. I don't think the movie's perfect. It has its issues. It has a lot of issues actually, but I think yeah, the Joker is such an interesting character and such an entertaining character. It just kind of carries the entire movie. So yeah, I do think this is the best superhero movie, just mainly because it just has the best villain. Speaking of Batman, I also have Batman Returns. This is kind of like a weird movie that I have. I don't know. I've always loved this movie. It's a weird guilty pleasure of mine. I know the movie's like not very good, and like a lot of people who are like hardcore Batman fans like really don't like this movie because they think it's like a terrible depiction of Batman. But I don't know. I've never read a comic book in my life, so I'm not really like that into the comic books or like the source material. I just think the movie is like really fun, and I like the campiness of it. I love like these three weirdos who are just kind of running around Gotham in costumes and just wreaking havoc. Like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is such an amazing character. And then I also have Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Thor Ragnarok. I'm not really huge on the MCU or anything like that, but I do like the MCU, and I think these are the three best MCU movies. Mainly just like Iron Man and Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know about Thor Ragnarok, but yeah, I think Iron Man probably the best MCU movie. I think it's just kind of like a perfect like origin story or whatever. And yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy to me kind of just has like the most interesting aesthetic of the entire MCU. I love the music. Thor Ragnarok, I think the only reason I even bought this movie is because like I thought it was really funny the first time I watched it. I don't know if it would still hold up for me, but I do like Taika Waititi. I think like What We Do in the Shadows is one of the funniest movies. Thor Ragnarok is definitely not as funny as What We Do in the Shadows, but it's still like I think probably the funniest MCU movie. And then I have Silver Linings Playbook. Yeah, probably not one of my favorite movies ever. Don't really know why I bought it on Blu-ray, but I do think it's really funny. And like the guy who directed the movie though is like apparently a terrible person. I guess he got in a fight with George Clooney on the set of Three Kings, and like he's just kind of known around Hollywood, I guess, as being like a really difficult person to work with. But there's nothing about this movie that reinvents the wheel or anything. It's like a rom-com, and they kind of also throw in like football into it to make it appeal more to guys. But you know, it worked on me because I like football, and yeah, I thought the movie was really funny. Like the characters are super unhinged. It's a movie like it's all about like mental illness, and like yeah, the characters are like super unhinged and crazy, but like it is kind of funny to just watch these characters have like such poor behavior and such poor like social skills. But I don't know, it's pretty funny. But the movie is also kind of like heartwarming. It's like a comfort movie. I don't know, I really like Silver Linings Playbook. The last one up is School of Rock, and this one's the only DVD I have on here. And yeah, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I've had this DVD for like who knows how long, like since I was a kid, I'm pretty sure. And like, I mean, yeah, who doesn't love School of Rock? It's just such a fun movie. I don't know. And like, yeah, I love classic rock, so great movie. I love School of Rock. So anyway, yeah, that's my Blu-ray collection. I know it's nothing special, it's nothing too impressive, but it was kind of just an excuse to do like a little quick review for like some of my favorite movies. Thanks you guys for watching, and see you next time.